Dude, I was bummed the other day when I got
Mm.
the text about Taskmaster. I said this to you last night. I didn't know things were that bad. I knew about the accident, and then I knew he was out of the hospital. So I thought he was being rehabilitated. I saw there was like a GoFundMe or something for the continued medical expenses. I I didn't know that he was in this much
See,
danger.
he didn't smart up. He didn't really smarten up anybody.
But you'd known that it
I
was
knew he had. I knew that he was because we talked, and he had congestive heart, some
right.
congestive heart problems. And the last time I saw him, God, I was with my buddy Dave Hero. We were at a signing, and we all had dinner together. That was like the last time I sat down with Kev, and
How long ago?
maybe a year. He was weak. He was plus he'd been there all day. It was late. It was probably 9:30 when we were catching food. But he was quiet. But one of the best, man. He just one of the. He was a great character. He was believable, and he wasn't a very big man. He was muscular wise. He had some gigantic thighs,
Mm-hmm.
but he knew how to get over, and he definitely knew what heat was. And when he got a chance to be on the creative end, I've said it a million times that if we don't have Kevin Sullivan, it wouldn't have mattered who was the third man. Because if we didn't have heat
Mm-hmm.
and the ability to pour heat onto us and not let the baby faces, Hamilton explained it to me the best, I think. He said, when you're a heel, he said, it's like a hot air balloon. He said, you got to fill the balloon up. And then you've got to, once the balloon's full, then you've got to have it elevate. And the higher that thing goes, the more money you draw. Because sooner or later, it's gonna get knocked down. And he said, but while you're trying to get that heat, he said every time somebody gets to you, it just drops another 300 feet. Then you got to get. He says it's best if you can do it, and you can get the baby faces to agree. And that's one thing I will say for Sting and Lex and Randy, for the crew of guys that was working as baby faces, Piper, Rick, Mongo, congratulations, Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I saw
Arn,
that.
all those guys that were working as baby faces, that they let us. We got a shitload of heat on them week after week. And if it wasn't for them being giving, then it wouldn't happen.
Kevin was the type of creative that was most like a I don't when I say TV writer, I don't mean wrestling TV writer. Someone writing episodic scripted television for actors where it was all about or writer. It's all about character and it's like the consistency of character, what would be what would be expected, what would be there wasn't a lot of gimmickry in what he was doing. I remember talking to him. He did an episode. He did a bunch of stuff for me when I was with Kayfabe, and one of the things he talked about when I was somewhat critical of the Dungeon of Doom. And now this remember anyone this is before Hogan puts on the black and white, right? So Hogan first comes over. And you got guys in the company like like Rick Steiner, Scott Steiner stuff. And Kevin said, I had to get people Hogan could beat. So it's the specific personalities on the chessboard
Yeah, he
he
took
put
he
together.
took the psychology of what was because Hulk was still in that the red and yellow, so he was using that same format. And he just put a Dungeon of Doom together. A lot of those guys, like Typhoon,
They were what Hogan was going through
yeah, he
in
he went
85,
through
86,
exactly.
87.
It was now it was Shark, and it was this. So
So you're having worked closely with Kevin, and you've always, even before this week, you've always talked to me about how much you liked him and how much you respected him for the work that he did with you guys there. When the external pressures were starting, let's say, in WCW, Kevin was one of those guys I think that got scapegoated and patsied a little bit when those changes were happening. Did you sense a frustration in Kevin hating what was happening at the corporate level with WCW? Did he express to you that?
No, because with him, he was never relieved of duty, really.
He was there till the end.
Yeah. He was all like, anybody that spent the time to talk to him, like he was my right hand. Like when I was creative, I really leaned on Kevin more than anybody, but also Mike Graham. Mike Graham was smart as fuck. So that was, and then at that same time, Dusty was in there with us. And Dusty was pushing to try to get the creative control. So we were antagonists, but at the same time, all four of us was it was a situation where it didn't matter where a good idea came from as long as it was a good idea. Like you could be in the business for a week and have a good idea. A good idea is a good idea. You didn't have to be top of the card or anything else.
Kevin as a worker, one of those guys like a Buzz Sawyer too, maybe, where it looked like he was murdering somebody legitimately.
We went down. Kevin moved down to. Kevin lived here. He lived in Daytona Beach at the Peninsula for years and years. Yeah,
so he was in the Keys too.
He moved from here to Islamorada.
Oh, okay.
And he had a gym down there called Froggy's. Which is still there. And so we went down one year on the way to Key West, and we spent probably 3 days in Islamorada so I could hang out with Kev. And it was our best friends, Vince and Tammy at that time, and then Max, their son, and then it was Tristan, Tamara, and myself. And we went to Kevin's house, and Kevin lived on the Gulf side of Islamorada. And we all still to this day, Vince has passed on, and then he was the first, and then Tristan passed. So it decimated the six of us. It was just like, but we all talk about that day specifically because it was the hottest day on earth. And we were sitting out and we were drinking beers at Kevin. But Kevin was so patient with T and Max. He took him down and showed him where to snorkel. And
I heard from people who've been down there when you're out back with him, he would say, "You guys want some lobster?" And he'd put a fucking mask on, jump in, and come up with a lobster. It was that plentiful down there.
Yeah, he was such a great host. And we went out that night, and he had a buddy named John that went out with us. John was hanging out that night, and Vince and I we were each other's worst company when it came. Especially like in the Keys, man, we'd drink. And we drank so much that night. I should say it was like maybe 7 o'clock a.m. when we call it a day, whatever the fuck. It was probably from noon to 7 a.m. the next day. And John said, man, he said, I had a headache for fucking 6 weeks. John was so hungover. It was just like, T really liked Kevin. And then when we got back, T and I we talked about Kevin when we were down in the Keys, down in the Key West. And I told him, I said, man, you got to look up some of Kevin's work. And he found some stuff from Japan where Kevin's got the spike and he's just gouging people and they're bleeding all over the place. And my son just thought, oh my God, like this guy's he's the shit, man.
Oh yeah.
So
he's scary. But even just a squash match, the forearms.
Oh,
he looked like he was murdering someone.
There was a breed of guys in that era when you sat back as a greenhorn and you watched them. I remember the first time I watched Abdullah the Butcher come on Saturday TV from center stage, and he had the handicap match against 2 job guys, and he beat the fuck out of them with one of those kendo sticks. And I don't think the thing was gimmicked.
I
He
don't think
just,
those sticks were, because they
yeah,
were.
you can gimmick them where they're a little bit they're a little bit tamer than the real deal.
You know, you're still getting hit with a fucking
Yeah.
stick, even if it's.
But I just watched him. I said, wow. I remember watching Rude when I think it was Super Brawl or something like that, was from that we were at the Mecca in Milwaukee, and at the end of the show, Sting went over, but then Rude attacked him in the back, and Rude fucking hit Steve with like 4 or 5 like live shots, swelled Sting's eye all up. And I remember when I was going up and down the road, and I just looked at him. I said, "Man," I said, don't you worry about coming in and being that careless?" He goes, "Man, you got one fucking time to come in your first time to get over." He said, I can say I'm sorry and fucking beg for a receipt the fucking rest of the time I'm there. He said, but he said, that fucking first impression, he said, you get that once. I was just like, okay, got it.
Kevin also built his career and stayed relevant without having gone to WWE after he established stardom. He worked for Vince Sr. as a jobber in, I think, 76. I know this because our series timeline that we used to produce, when we would choose somebody to cover a year in a federation, one of the things was they had to work on near the top and they had to be there all year. And once you got like into the 70s, because of all the territories, nobody stayed anywhere for a year. So it was very hard filling in years like 76, 75. And I remember Anthony doing all the research. He said there's one name who was here from January to December. I said, who? He said, Kevin Sullivan, doing jobs. But after he achieved prominence with the pencil, but also in the ring, he never cashed in.
Because he had that great Florida run.
That made him. Yeah.
I mean,
Early 80s.
That was the territory.
Yeah.
You know.
And doing the other thing, I don't know that I realized this, but he did the dark kind of occult thing. There's one word he never said was the devil or Satan. And he was able to, I remember talking to him about it. He said, I threw the Buddha Dean and all this shit that people didn't know what I was talking about, but I never had to get specific with Satan or nothing like that. And he was right. He was able to do it just by building this kind of mystical figure, scary.
I think my favorite Kevin Sullivan quote is, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. That was...
He had so many. My favorite.
Fuck, man.
It was on the air in one of our shows together. It might have been. Everyone's talking about this one now. Steve, we should get it up if I don't have it. Kevin Sullivan and the end of WCW. Kind of dovetails into two things that are popular in wrestling media right now. But we sat him down. It was a special investigative special on the channel. And we went through the last 5 months, week by week. Read what was happening on camera and behind the scenes to get his take of what was going on in the locker rooms and offices as this shit was falling apart. It's fascinating. It was one of our best performing titles, and it wasn't even one of our series. But I think it was on that one. He said, you know the old saying, right? What do old prostitutes, old buildings, and old politicians have in common? I said, what? He goes, credibility. That's Kev, man.
Yeah. Never is just so blessed to walk down that fucking aisle in that stupid fucking Oz outfit and have him going, welcome to Oz! Welcome to Oz! Choking a fucking monkey in front of me and not realizing, like, that's so fucking etched and golden in my mind. And then a week later, sitting in the Holiday Inn, and Nancy's at the table and Kevin's at the table and we're smoking a fatty. And I looked at him, I said, Kev, I don't get it, man. I don't get the gimmick. He said, brother, take the fucking money. He says, you know how many people, yes, he said, no, how many fucking, he said, you're making 6 figures. Let me fucking take the money. Shut the fuck up. Pass that joint. He was just like, it was one of those things where I just like, my mentors were guys that when they told me shit, it was just like, okay, I definitely met you for a reason.
Hmm.
Get your shit in, get over, stay strong, get your fucking money, take your money, shut the fuck up.
Something anyone didn't read my book Kayfabe may not know. The only time I was booked in any angle by a wrestling booker was by Kevin Sullivan at the roast of the Iron Sheik. I get James, one of the other promoters, calls me up to texts me, come up to room whatever. I was like, what's going on? I had a million things to do. Big production, the roast, the comedians, wrestlers. And it was the first time we were trying anything like this. And he said, we want to have Sheik hit Brian. I said, we can't do that, Brian Blair, because they had that stupid thing that Sheiky would cut promos on my early shoot interviews.
I think he just wanted to humble him.
Old country way. I said, no, he said, Brian's in the room. Just come up here. So I walk in. The way I describe in the book, I walked into 1987. It was a hotel room filled with smoke. I almost couldn't see. The little clock radio is playing like the Allman Brothers or something. And everyone's sitting around. Sheiky's sitting there with a St. Paulie girl. Brian's next to him like his best friend. And Sullivan's there, some of the other workers and crew. And Sullivan's there. I'm like, okay, well, I was like, all right, here's how we're going to do this. Because I walk in and they're all talking. Sullivan stands up. He goes, all right, we're going to do it this way. And he lays the whole thing out. He turns to me. He goes, now you've been on Law and Order, so you can do this. So you got to be a part of this now. Puts us all in, books the slap. So I was actually part of a Kevin Sullivan booked angle.
You're blessed.
I'm blessed. I'm blessed to have worked. But more than all this, Kevin, more than all the wrestling stuff we're talking about, there's a handful of guys, maybe you were one of them, who I looked forward to seeing, not getting a show, not sitting down and having a meal, talking about the Red Sox, or I didn't follow baseball. I was always give him shit about the Patriots, but talking sports and the market. He was big into real estate. I always talk about real estate with him. I just looked forward. We used to call him Grandpa. I always looked forward to seeing Grandpa when he came. And those are the things that I remember when I think about Kevin Sullivan. He's a great worker, but
yeah,
he was a great guy.
It's hard when you losing people fucking sucks, but I've been so blessed by the people that I've crossed paths with. The three guys that I just mentioned that I counted on when I was semi in charge of creative, but Dusty's gone, Kevin's gone, and Mike's gone.
Yeah. We had Kevin on. Fortunately, he was one of the people when we first started bringing guests on for our premium Click This TV subscribers. We both said Kevin immediately when we were going through lists of people. And we have a couple of moments here that we can show from that of Kevin and his brilliance. I don't know what the content is. Just bring up the first clip. We'll see what.
Well, one of the things, biggest compliment I ever got, Jim Barnett sat in the dressing room and watched me give finishes. And I would bring the two guys in, and I would immediately separate myself from them by saying, Steve, you got to do a job for Kevin tonight. I wouldn't say that. I would say, Steve, you got to do Kevin a favor tonight. I'm sure he'll appreciate it. Well, what's he going to say? If I say you're going to do a job for Kevin, he may have a rebuttal, but he's not going to say, no, I'm not putting Kevin over because I'm doing him a favor. And in turn, that favor should come back sometime. And if it doesn't, it wasn't in the cards. And Barnett said, I had never seen anybody put people so much at unease where they had to make the decision.
Right.
It was great. I never understood.
He was great.